This training video is to help everybody understand what goes into generating a net price file for a major retailer. It's important that we give a major retailer the correct net pricing when we give them a price quote, such as a 2014 price list, because they're only going to take the time to load it once. And if there's any errors in that price list, it's obviously going to cost accounts receivable issues in the future. Our invoices might bill at the wrong level. Their payments might be off, and it just causes a lot of headaches on both the customer side and Amex side. This is not as important on small customers that are very directly related to or loyal to Amex, where if there's a pricing issue with a smaller customer, we can simply communicate with them and they fix it on the fly. So this really applies to customers like the Keystones and the Advanced Auto Parts, O'Reilly's, and the Cabela's of the world. So please take a second to watch this just to get an understanding of what goes into generating that price file. First off, to generate it in Excel is not good because our pricing systems are generally unique for these customers. There's usually special pricing, discounts that are different by category. Say their floor liner discount might be different than a Rugged Ridge versus Amex product. There's also round-off errors when we do it in Excel, and even that 1 penny difference between an Excel sheet that we deliver a customer on a price file and what our invoices actually generate cause us a lot of headaches because that penny has to be written off and handled on a case-by-case basis manually. Therefore, it is best on these major retailers that deal with pricing once per year to get the prices directly out of Navision. This is the process that it takes. First off, you have to come up with a list of SKUs that that customer will recognize. So the best starting point for me is usually the jobber sheet. So I went to Ecom and I gathered the jobber sheet. And from this jobber sheet, I'm simply going to grab the SKU column because that's the number that most of our customers will recognize. That's actually the Amex number in most cases. I'm deleting out everything but the number. And now I have a list of SKUs to deliver to that customer. I'm going to ensure that it is a text column to avoid errors with Amex numbers, dropping zeros. And I'm going to get rid of the header. So that's step one. Step two is to go to Navision. And before you run this, you have to make sure that all the pricing in Navision is up to date with the proper expiration dates and so forth. I'm going to go to a customer and I need to make sure that the pricing is set up correctly for that customer, and that can take a few minutes to review just to be safe. Once I know that's correct and I know the prices have been loaded into Navision in the sales price table, I can then go to a quote, F3 to create a new quote, and enter that customer's number. Now in this case, I want to give them pricing for next year. To do that, I need to make sure I change the date to a date within next year. This will cause Navision to go out and look at prices where the start and end date are affected by this order date. Now that I have this, I can take this quote number, copy it, and go back to my Excel sheet. I need to create an Excel sheet where the first column in the Excel sheet is that quote number. The second column is the SKU, and the third column is the quantity. Now that I've got this sheet, I want to save it as a text file, tab delimited, and I'm going to close that file. Next, I'm going to audit that file to make sure there's no corruption, so I'm going to open a notepad editor. Now that I have that file, I'm simply looking at the line feeds and the spaces to make sure that they look correct, and there's no additional tabs, which are represented by the arrows. I can scan down to the bottom of the file, and you'll see here there's lines or information in the file that are blank, and that will cause an error. So I'm simply going to highlight those and delete them. And looking at the file, this file looks pretty clean. Basically everything is the quote number, a tab, the item number, a tab, and the quantity, and in a line feed. I'm going to save this and close it. At this point, I can go back to Navision, go to Management, go to Sales Manager Edits, and do a price quote. On the price quote, I'm going to go find that file again, and then I'm going to choose Import and hit OK. As you can see, this step in the process is going to take a while. You can see the graph is moving very slowly. The downside is that I'm going to run into errors. What's going to happen is it's going to go through adding all of those products to the quote that I just created and then applying the customer's exact net price based on their pricing rules. Unfortunately, in our jobber file, there will be items that might have been blocked or discontinued. There might be items in the jobber file that aren't in stock yet, so the item cards aren't completely set up. And what's going to happen is I'm going to run into each of those items throughout this process. I'm going to have to fix those items, make notes of them in order to continue the process. And every time, I'm going to have to start this process over. And this is what seems to take a lot of time because this actually works as a cleansing process of our jobber file to Navision, cleaning up the Navision setup of items. But it does take a lot of time, in most cases an hour or two per customer. The net result, though, is that the customer gets a very good net price list, and the items within Navision that are on the jobber sheet will be caught and cleaned up now as far as removing those items that are blocked or setting up items that are new. So I'll show you a couple examples of those, and I'll cut out a lot of the time involved just to keep the video short. Okay, the first error has popped up, and this error tells me that the blocked on 76623-01. Therefore, that item in the jobber sheet is blocked within Navision. So I need to go either unblock it here or remove it from my list that I'm trying to import. And I also want to make a note of it to communicate it back to Gonzalo and others that might want to consider removing it from the jobber sheet. In this case, I'm just going to not include that in this upload. So I'm going to go back to my file, Control F, and find that number. And unfortunately, that number is not the number that I'm trying to upload, so that must be a master number. So I'm now going to have to go to Navision, go to the items, find that item, make a note of the OMIX number, go back to my file, and find that OMIX number. Now that I found that in my file that I'm uploading, I'm going to remove it. I'm not going to bother giving the customer a quote on that particular item. And those are the kind of decisions that you have to make for several items throughout the process, which takes a lot of time. I'll now save this cleaned up file, close it, go back to management, and I'll start the process over. And again, I wait. So now that I've waited a while, I get another error, and this time it's a blocked on 11-560-11. So I'll make a note of that number, and again, I have to go fix it. In this case, I'm going to remove it again from our file. I'm going to save the file, I'm going to close the file, and again, start the process over. Now, I've cut some time out of the video just to save video length, but you can see here it continues to process and it takes several minutes. It's actually, each one of these is 10,000 increments, and every 10,000 is a line number, and that's one SKU that's running through the entire price logic for this customer. And that's what takes the time. You can imagine also the burden on Navision that this can place, which is why I choose to do this in a test database or late at night after hours, because you would not want to do this during business hours, as it will tie up all of the sales order and pricing processes within Navision. And here again is one more example where it ran into an item after processing for several minutes. The 15-2-10-03 does not have an inventory posting group set up. So again, this is going to happen a half a dozen to a dozen times. That's a half a dozen to a dozen SKUs out of 8,000 or 8,500 SKUs that we're loading. So it's not that there's a high error rate, but when status changes on items, it does affect this process, and therefore it takes just a lot of time to do the process. I'm going to go ahead and clean up the rest of the file to save you the burden and show you the end result. And now, once the process is finished, the benefit is I can go back to sales receivables, go back to the quote I created, and I can see now that I have the item number, the cross-reference number, the quantity, and the net price for every line item listed. And by loading it from the jobber sheet, Navision actually captured the cross-reference number as well. So the next step is to put this into Excel, and I usually like to VLOOKUP this back to the jobber sheet and deliver that to the customer. So I open an Excel sheet. From Navision, I know that the second and the third column are going to be the part numbers. So in my Excel sheet, I want to make sure my second and third column are formatted as text so I don't lose the zeros off my OMIX numbers. I then highlight the entire sheet and copy and then paste into Excel. My next step is to make sure I'm giving them only the OMIX number. So in this case, I'm going to sort on the cross-reference number. And you'll see it provides the OMIX number every place there is an OMIX number. And when I scan down far enough, I'll figure out where the cross-references end. And in this case, the master number and the OMIX number are the same for us. Paste them into the cross-reference number column, and now I can clean out the extra data I don't need, update the column header, and save the file, and I have a file with net pricing out of Navision that I can deliver to the customer.